I'm sure that you walked into a wine store before and you saw, next to the wine name and maybe the price, some sort of wine rating. And I'm sure that you've maybe wondered, who does this matter? Should I be paying attention to it? And the answer is, well, it depends. It depends on who rated the wine, who ranked the wine, and if that's important to you as a consumer. So let's talk a little bit about wine ratings and what they actually mean. So wine ratings, basically, you have to look at who is actually rating the wine. So sometimes you'll see something like, oh, this wine was rated 100% by Good Housekeeping magazine. Well, Good Housekeeping magazine, I'm not really sure, are they very highly knowledgeable about wine? Do they have an in-house wine expert? And what kind of wine are they actually rating? A lot of times when you see something like that, it might actually be considered what we call paid content, where somebody like a winery that might not per se be as good, they actually make a deal with Good Housekeeping magazine or another magazine, Cosmopolitan, whatever that may be. And they actually make it's almost like a promo. So they write an article about it and then they actually give them a rating. But it doesn't really mean that it is better than Opus One, okay, which some of you guys have researched. So a wine rating score depends on the wine critic and it depends on the source that it's coming from. Typically, and we will talk about one very reputable wine critic, but you typically want to look at typically a wine magazine or some sort of an expert, connoisseur, sommelier of wine that is actually giving the rating. To give you an idea, I just put this up there, kind of give the ranges and whatever it might be. These were developed by Robert Parker. He is the probably one of the most known wine critics out there, and we'll talk about him in a little bit. But he actually looks at, it is a scale of 100, or I'm sorry, zero, I guess, 0 to 100. But actually, if you look around 50, the wine is actually considered appalling. So, something that actually falls below anything in the 80s, that is not a wine that many would consider good or even great. So there you go. So typically they're on 100 scale. It's a little bit hard to read, but basically this kind of gives you a little bit understanding of Robert Parker and what he developed and what most major wine critics actually use out there. Also wine stores. A lot of stores, they actually rate their own wine. If you go to something like Total Wine, it's a fabulous wine store, and they will actually critique the wines themselves, or they'll have their staff, who are very knowledgeable of wine, actually give their own score. Most of the time, they're following a very similar scale to this, and you'll see that a lot of times when you look up a wine, the Total Wine score, Robert Parker score, maybe Wine Spectator, they will be very similar, maybe usually within a few points. So maybe 89 to 90 or 91. You'll never see a wine that Robert Parker has graded 50, given 100 by somebody who works or who's knowledgeable of wine. You might see this with something like what I described, somebody like Good Housekeeping magazine. They might rank a wine 100, like Yellowtail, okay, Chardonnay, versus that's something that Robert Parker would probably give like a 52. So there you are. So let's talk about Robert Parker and who he is. So what's crazy about Robert Parker and what everybody needs to understand about him is he has a very unique gift, which has been tested many times. He has the ability to, and I'm sure you guys have heard about somebody who has a photographic memory, where they can literally, look at something and they can recite it because word for word. He has what is very difficult to understand, but he claims, and it has been tested, he has almost like a photographic memory when it comes to taste and to smell. And he has been able to, he has, literally drank and tested tens of thousands of wines, if not more than that. And he is able to recall the wines that he has tasted to such detail that it's mind-boggling. And it does give him, it has, like I said, he's done numerous blind tests. People have tried to trick him, and for the most part, he always is able to succeed and really tell you which wine is from there, and he's pretty accurate. He's a local guy. He actually, grew up in Baltimore, went to University of Maryland. His wine is just something that he became interested in. He was an attorney by trade. He definitely, this is something that he decided to kind of do on his own. He developed a love for wine when he was, visiting, I think, a girlfriend of his that she was studying in France, and he kind of fell in love with wine, and he kind of fell in love with this whole everything about it, and just wanted to drink it. And while he was still working as an attorney or as a general counsel, he started writing about wine, and he started kind of he would pick a wine and write about it, and he would kind of share this information with his friends. And this is before the internet, so he would actually mail out like copies of what he was writing, and people started reading it and being like, wow, this is really cool. Like, I'd like to know more about wine. And this kind of became a really big thing for him. And he started getting more and more subscribers, and he kind of started really building his arsenal of knowledge when it came to wine. He actually developed what's now called the Wine Advocate, which is not the same as Wine Spectator. Wine Spectator is another big wine magazine, but Wine Advocate is the one that's associated with Robert Parker. And he, it's along with Wine Spectator, these are the two biggest wine magazines in the world, where people who love wine, who manufacture wine, who produce wine, these are the two publications that we look to for knowledge and expertise on this particular subject. Now, Robert Parker does have also a reputation of not being the nicest guy. He definitely is quite cocky, and he challenges and accepts challenges of people that are trying to, kind of see, like, does he really know as much about wine as he claims? So there are people, and he participates in them. This is an example of a blind tasting that he set up. A lot of universities that teach wine at a much greater granular level than we do here, they actually have these stadiums and these tasting rooms. They're super cool. And what happens, you guys can see that the glasses are actually located on a piece of plastic. And what they do is, you can see that some of the wines are red, some of them are white. Most of these seem to be red or rosé. But what they do is they actually turn on these lights that discolor the wine. So all the wines actually look black, and you can't see. So you literally are only tasting the wines, and you can't even see are they light, are they dark, and your senses of smell and of taste are heightened by the fact that you kind of lose your ability to see. And we actually judge a lot of food and drinks before we even drink things by what we see and what we perceive it's going to be. So these are the tastings where somebody will actually give him a blind tasting, 10, 12 glasses, and then he will have to, without knowing anything about the wines that he's drinking, he'll actually have to say, what type of wine it was, potentially when it was grown, what region it comes from, and he's pretty good. He can actually get it down to, most of the time, the winery that it came from. So it's pretty spectacular. To actually watch it, you're like, he has to be cheating, but he's not. He is the most awarded writer critic in history. I mean, it's not just in North America. He's renowned all over the world. So to be given the presidential honors by a French president and by an Italian president for the recognition of the wine is pretty crazy. Robert Parker, he hosts numerous events throughout the world, speaking about wine production, about quality, about sustainability. And it's definitely somebody that you guys, if you're interested in wine and eventually going into the restaurant industry, somebody you should look to see what does he, and also what is his magazine, where do they rank and rate the wine that you are selecting to put on your wine list. Because for a wine customer or client just like myself, it definitely gives your organization credibility if you are utilizing these types of sources to develop your wine list and to make sure that you are only serving the highest quality wine. And remember, that doesn't always mean the most expensive, because there are some amazing wines that Robert Parker has ranked and rated that are actually quite reasonable. And by that, I mean literally under $10. So just going and looking at some of those wines and some of those options that you might have for your establishments could be very beneficial, and your customers will appreciate it.